speak in Swedish, we normally say free world, which is a very nice way of welcoming people to. Welcome to the free world. But we are today very happy to have Wong Yik Mo here, giving us a presentation of what is going on in Hong Kong, the demonstrations, the police brutality, but also in a longer term perspective, how is the development in Hong Kong and in China. I think, and it sounds trivial to say, but there is a growing understanding in Sweden, as in Europe, that you need to relate to and understand China. And to understand China is not easy because, as Mr. Fredin has been an ambassador to China, he recently said no one really knows what is going on. It is very difficult to grasp and to understand what tendencies that will be the supreme. But there is also a broader understanding that China is not far away. China is here in a number of different dimensions. You can discuss telecom, you can discuss car industry, but you can also discuss political debate. You can discuss how the Chinese embassy is acting here in Stockholm. And what we can see is, of course, that what is going on in China do have an impact on the rest of the world, much more than we would have believed 30 years ago. I mean, if we had had a seminar here 30 years ago and I had informed you that my view was that 2019, our biggest industry, the car industry Volvo, would be owned by a Chinese company, no one would have believed me. And that's a sign of how deep and strong the changes are. And understanding Hong Kong is in some way understanding very much what will happen in China, because how the regime in Beijing looks upon Hong Kong is, of course, a very clear way of understanding how opposition and democracy is looked upon. I mean, I'm always struck by those despots and dictators who say that liberal democracy is dead, but they are extremely afraid of it. That's what we see in Hong Kong, because if they really believe that liberal democracy was dead, they could be very relaxed about what is going on in Hong Kong, or for that sake in Moscow or any other place. We are very happy to have you here. And Wong Yik Mo, I would like to give you the word. You have a big experience in democratic activism, in the movement since 2014, and we are eager to hear about these experiences, and you are very welcome here. So please, the floor is yours. And I think we can give him an applause.
Thank you. Please. Testing. Is my mic working? Good. Yes. Right, so my name is Wong Yik Mo. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm a member of Demo Sisto. I was also the vice convener before October 1st, before my term ended. I was the vice convener of Civil Human Rights Front, and we've organized major events, including the marches where 1 million of people, 2 million of them, and 1.7 million respectively participated. Right. Now, Hong Kong, we are having a movement. And it's not just anti-extradition movement, it's actually a freedom movement. In this movement, we fight for freedom, for free election. We fight for freedom from fear, freedom from violence. First of all, I would like to introduce you the basics of Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, we have one country, two systems, and that is stipulated in our basic law. And if you know history, you must know the Sino-British Joint Declaration. And in this declaration, they guaranteed free election to Hong Kong. Of course, not at the beginning, but eventually we will have free election. And therefore, what we are fighting for is what has been promised to Hong Kong. Well, currently, the election system, we have chief executive, that is the number one, like the president of Hong Kong. And she or he is elected by 1,200 elites. So it's not popular voting. And the other election is called Legislative Council election. Half of them are direct election, free election, and half of them are also elected by elites. And that is a problem. And this is also triggered the umbrella movement in 2014. So some people might think Hong Kong is part of China, but we're actually different. We have different judicial system. We practice common law system, whereas in China they practice some kind of more civil law Chinese style of judiciary, where the judges have to vow to be loyal to the Communist Party, whereas we vow to be, judges don't have to, they are not loyal to the party, they are loyal to the people and to the rule of law. We have our own currency, we have a border with China. And the tension between Hong Kong and China has been growing for the past few years, especially after the umbrella movement. The deterioration of rule of law and the freedoms in Hong Kong has been speeding up. For example, there is an interpretation of basic law, which means whenever Beijing likes, they can interpret your basic law saying, oh, that's not right. This is what we actually mean in this basic law. So they are playing a legislative kind of role. And they have disqualified legislators, elected lawmakers, and they even disqualify election candidates. And high-speed railway in West Kowloon, because in Hong Kong, according to basic law, mainland officials are not allowed to practice their duty in Hong Kong. But this railway station gives them the right to conduct their duties in Hong Kong, which is another breach of basic law and rule of law. And very recently, Carrie Lam announced anti-mask law through emergency regulation ordinance, which means she bypasses the legislature to announce a decree. And actually, this emergency regulation ordinance was a 1922 law, colony era kind of law. So, with all this background, I think it's not very difficult to understand why Hong Kongers are very afraid of extradition law. Once passed, everyone in Hong Kong, not just Hong Konger, even foreigners, you may be extradited to China to face their trial and imprisonment. And as we all know, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo, he died in China in the jail. So you can imagine what awaits us if this law passes. 5 years ago, during the umbrella movement, I would like to explain something very important if you wish to understand Hong Kong. Well, during this movement, we fought for free election, and there was a split between the radical protesters and the peaceful protesters. And I would say that was the failure of the whole movement, because we didn't trust each other, because we did not support each other. So, Hong Kongers were very peaceful and law-abiding citizens. Let me tell you something. When I mention the word radical, what would you think of? What would come up to your mind? Breaking glasses? Burning cars? No. In Hong Kong 5 years ago, radical is when people sit in the street. And they call it radical. They would say, there are other ways, through the institution to make changes. So civil obedience was regarded as a very radical kind of way to protest. And it was not accepted by the majority of people. Something that we call violence is not killing people, is not burning the whole building. By breaking one glass, that was the most violent thing that has happened during umbrella movement. So you have to understand Hong Kong in this way. We do not like to break the laws. So what happened this year in 2019? Something changed. Let me explain. So 1 million people took to the street on the 9th of June to oppose extradition bill. And of course, Carrie Lam said no on that very night. She said the second reading of the bill will resume. And therefore, a few days later on Wednesday, a few like 10,000 people or more went to the legislature to surround the legislature to stop the second reading from resuming. And it was peaceful. People only wanted to block it. So what have we got in return was, of course, violence that you must be very familiar with, which also triggered the June 16th march by 2 million of people. After this march, we opposed the police violence. At the beginning, we demanded the withdrawal of the bill, and Carrie Lam steps down. And after the violence of the police, we had 5 demands. And the most important one is to investigate the police violence. So I would say this movement has transformed into from an anti-extradition bill into anti-police violence movement, which is very important because this is a core demand of the people. And then another very important event was July 1st. There was the establishment day of Hong Kong when we were handed back to China. There were vandalism in the legislature. As I understand, there are some press, they reported Hong Kong as splitting again. So the peaceful protesters, they marched with us, with the organizer, while the youngsters, they vandalized the legislature. But the truth is, everyone are using their own ways to protest. You know, housewives with their kids, 2-year-old kids, they cannot go to legislature and vandalize. And that's why they go with a crowd to march. And actually afterwards, many people were crying and begging us as the organizer to call for people to support the protesters in the legislature. So something changed on this day. People started to understand why the radical protesters would risk their lives, because there are rumors of, using real live rounds. And the radical protesters, they have read out their manifesto inside of the chamber. And this made a huge change in Hong Kong, because people started to realize that these people, they have targets. When they vandalize, they put a word on the library, saying their historical documents do not vandalize. And the portraits of the legislative chairpersons, they were selecting which one is evil enough that they have to destroy their portrait, and which ones are slightly better that they do not necessarily have to destroy. I mean, they have their target. They are not gangsters. And also when they take drinks from the canteen, they pay. So imagine gangsters going to vandalize and looting and take everything. Would they pay? No, they would not. So I have to say, in Hong Kong, we have very different, very special people, I have to say. And during this movement, we have been facing many challenges. The first one will be, of course, police violence. I would say the problems that we have is police violence, triad violence. These people are hired to attack protesters, and the government not responding. In their press conferences, they are lying, more lies, covering up. And there's some rumors saying that the police officers responsible for the press con, they don't know what has been happening. And that's why they have been repeating the same things. And then the complaint mechanism not functioning. We try to complain through institutional ways to seek solutions, but it's simply not functioning. And then the escalation of violence and even very serious crimes. There are allegations of rape by the police, gang rapes, not just to girls, but even to boys, underage boys. And there are allegations of death or even murder. Maybe not murder, but there are some, maybe by accident, they kill people. And all these challenges we try to overcome. So how should we react to the violence? We simply take to the street. So more people took to the street. Silver hair groups, elderlies, civil servants even. Civil servants is very dangerous for them because they are supposed to hold neutrality because of their identity. But even then, they will risk losing their jobs to take to the streets, say no to violence. And it's only for violence and for justice. Legal sector protesters, lawyers, and to your surprise, even employees from Department of Justice. So these people, they work for the government. Lawyers who work for the government, they take to the street to say no to the government. Housewives, office ladies, taxi drivers, construction workers, just everyone, even mainland Chinese who migrated to Hong Kong, they love Hong Kong, and that's why they have to take to the street and say no to evil laws and to say no to violence. They are risking their families in the mainland. And then, sometimes we, these protesters, they take to the street because they believe a larger number will make it safer to protesters so that they can prevent violence, because the government has been calling us violence for a very long time. But then we understand very well that whenever there's police officers, there will be violence, because they will start to attack protesters first. And then there are also undercover police officers provoking violence, using violence, and from videos, we have evidence that all these undercover police officers, they normally have an illuminating device on their arms or on their attached to their backs. So, so people thought the best way to prevent violence is to overwhelm them by a huge turnout rate. So to take to the street, and sometimes they will even, to beg. I don't like them to beg us, but then, people that are desperate, they want us as an organizer, Civil Human Rights Front, to organize another demonstration. And that's why we had 1.7 million people taking to the street, despite the heavy rain, people holding umbrellas. But then later on, the police officers, they even banned our demonstrations. I know this is ridiculous, but in Hong Kong, we need the authorization of the police to demonstrate. I know in many places, including Europe, you only have to notify the police to let them, say, arrange the traffic. But in Hong Kong, when they say no, they can say no. You cannot demonstrate. And also, we have been using creative ways to protest. I know that many foreign press or government, they've been criticizing Hong Kong protesters for vandalizing, for using violence. But then I have to make it very clear that for a very long time we have tried everything that we could to go on the protest, including Baltic ways. Back I think 30 years ago in the Baltic states, people held hands to form a chain, human chain, with 1 million people. And we have tried that in Hong Kong. So in 5 districts, it was a huge success. And then in the past, we used to sing Hallelujah. You see this police officer? So what we tried to do was to use peaceful means to to protest. Sorry, where is that? Technician, please. Or should I close? All right, it's here. We sing Hallelujah for 24 hours, nonstop. So I don't know who will be as creative as Hong Kongers. Many of these people, including me, I'm not religious. But then we only see this as a way to protest, and we will see it as a religious neutral. We don't care, as long as it's a symbol of goodwill. We will do it. And then linen wall. You know, we've been building linen walls in many districts, like massive linen wall. And this is the way that we protest. And also, we make fun of ourselves. If you know Sia, so we cut the video from a pro-police person singer. And this is a song from Sia, and we use this song to motivate ourselves. You know, in the street, when you go to the street, someone says "ah," and the other ones will sing "say again," because we need energy. We need to entertain ourselves, because otherwise it will be too heavy to go on the protest. We also try to, crowdfunding to post advertisement on international media from pages. So I think within one day we have got like more than 100,000 euros. So we can see the support from the civil societies. But then with all this effort, what have we got? There was escalation and further escalation of violence by the police and by trial members. Okay, I'll try to save some time. Trial members have been attacking protesters indiscriminately. In Yunlong, 400 of them, of the trial members, they held metal rods and bamboo sticks to attack people, including pregnant women, including legislator, including journalists. And then they have got no consequence. The police, they simply let him go. The police, they came late, and when they replied to the press, they said, sorry, I don't see any people holding weapons. But the fact is, the police officers, they went to talk to these trial members who were holding weapons in their hands. So can you feel the anger from the Hong Kongers? So we tried our best to abide with the law. And this is what we get. Now I'm going to show you a very bloody photo. This is attacked by trial members with a machete. So it's so deep that you can even see the bone. And in fact, a friend of mine, she was posting things on the linen wall. She was stabbed into her back with a knife, 5 centimeters, and she survived. Taxi driver drove his car into the crowd, no consequence. When the police arrived, the police arrested the victims. And then just very recently, I think a few days ago, a mainland Chinese came to Hong Kong. He attacked a random guy in the street giving out flyers. So he sliced open his tummy, and the intestine went out. So it became very dangerous for us. I even tell my parents, my mom, to stay outside of Hong Kong, do not come back to Hong Kong, because this is very dangerous. First, the police, they will attack you. Second, the police supporters, they will attack you because they will have no consequence. And if you call the police, they will arrest you and beat you up. So this is what's happening in Hong Kong. And also there are alleged allegation of, right, I've mentioned this already. The police, they beat protesters in detention facilities till their bones fracture. And they are denied to see lawyers and to see their family members when they try to visit. So to this point, the government tells us to seek legal ways, inside the Constitution, to complain. We have complained against police office, And guess what? This is a police department, and they never work. They never work. There's another thing called IPCC, Independent Police Complaint Council. They have no mandate, they have no power to summon, they have no power to investigate. They can only review reports, and that's it. After they review the report, they say, what you've done is wrong, and that's it. Literally, that's it. No consequence. And then some people will even tell us to have dialogue with Carrie Lam. So in September, 40 people had a dialogue with Carrie Lam. And what happens next? Oh, Carrie Lam announces anti-mask law through emergency regulation ordinance. And we know Carrie Lam very well. Whenever she makes a promise, she will break the promise. And whenever she shows a goodwill, it is to show the international media and government that the government is doing something. But then soon after, you will have consequence. For example, this anti-mask law. But we also try to try other ways to go on this protest. And I think this is one thing that the international media has not covered very much. You know, we have a list of the shops that we want to support and a list of shops that we don't want to support. For example, Chinese-owned shops. Because we know you have to eat, you have to buy stuff every day. And by buying Chinese stuff, you're supporting them. And you're killing all the small shops because that's something, monopoly in Hong Kong is a huge problem. And we are trying to support the movement by everything that we can. And this shop, for example, they support the movement and it's been vandalized. The glass has been broken, all the machines inside the restaurants are vandalized. But still, people, they will queue up, they will support them, they will go there for food. And this is the way Hong Kongers are protesting. So now I will come to the part about the war, actually. So what we are protesting is not just anti-extradition. It's not just for free election. It's not just for freedom from fear, from violence. But it's also a war between liberal democracy and totalitarian regime, the Chinese model. Hong Kong stands in the front line between, well, I regret to say the West. I wouldn't say the West is necessarily liberal, but then we stand in the front line between, well, liberal democracy and China. China is trying to export its China model all over the world. If you see Belt and Road, if you see the investment in different countries, and if you see Cathay Pacific, for example, this is Hong Kong airline. It's UK owned. But we used to be proud of Cathay Pacific. We call it Hong Kong Airline, you know. But then very recently, their CEO has been changed. And as far as I know, the CEO of Swire, not just Cathay Pacific, Swire has been summoned to Beijing to be given a lecture. So afterwards, they have dismissed at least 32 of the employees. For the reasons, it's very peculiar. They don't give reasons. They simply go there and ask you, is this your photo? You say no. Thank you. Well, sorry, you say yes, but is this your Facebook page? You say no. I have another Facebook page. They say thank you. They dismiss you. So they cannot prove that this is your Facebook page. You know, they can be framed by anyone. Some flight attendants, they reported the oxygen container, like there's a leak of oxygen container. You know, the whistleblower who reported the leak were dismissed. Why? You don't know. And actually, Cathay Pacific has been sending emails, internal emails to its employees to encourage them to report on their colleagues. And there are cases like when they are talking casually in the cabin, one sibling said, "Oh, sorry, you are doomed because I have recorded what you have said. I'm going to report you." So things like this can happen in Cathay Pacific. Imagine things like this can happen to a UK-owned enterprise. It can happen to Sweden. And actually, look at Mercedes. They have to apologize to China by quoting Dalai Lama on their Telegram. Oh, sorry, was it IG, Instagram? I mean, the Chinese, mainland Chinese, they don't even allowed to use IG. But Mercedes, they still have to apologize because they want to sell cars. BNP Paribas, the French bank, they have dismissed one Hong Kong manager because he's supporting the Hong Kong movement. And MBA, I mean, there are many cases of them, and you understand all these. I just want to tell you that now they are not able to stand up for Hong Kong. When something happens in Hong Kong, they cannot even speak out, not to mention taking actions. One day when China grows so big, so strong, when you are totally dependent on the Chinese market and their investment, if a violation of human rights would happen in Sweden, do you think these companies will stand up for you, for your Swedish people, for European people? I doubt it. And another danger is, well, with the violation of human rights in China, I think this sends a very strong signal to other totalitarian regimes that Europe is not strong enough to stop all these. For example, Turkey, Chile, Iraq. Things are happening. How can we stop them? So I think Europe has to speak up and take action to help Hong Kong. Because if Hong Kong falls, what will be the next? Taiwan, maybe? And Japan, Korea, Singapore. And one day, it will come to Europe. So it's very important to know, supporting Hong Kong, helping Hong Kong is helping yourself. Because now we're not talking about Hong Kong. We are talking about ideology, liberal democracy. And that's something that we have to safeguard. Thank you.